You might think that YouTube has a good and bright history, but from its early stages till now, YouTube has had many strange YouTubers that have come and go. But this person that we're going to be talking about would unfortunately go on and commit a heinous crime. But before we begin, if true crime stories intrigue your interest, then I highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as that's all I do. And if you do subscribe, you can expect a brand new video every week. But with all that being said, let's begin. Our main protagonist is called Trey Sessler, and well, Trey was born in a place called Waller County. Waller was located in Texas, and on the early mornings of August 3rd, 1989, the young Sesler was born. His mother, who was called Rhonda, and his father, who was called Lawton, would have another child prior to Trey, and his name was Mark. The life of Trey was pretty bog standard, to say the least. He would get a nice American upbringing, and his family would never get into financial difficulties or any other sort of difficulties. His parents were hard-working citizens for Waller County. His father would work in the schooling industry. While his sons were growing up, he would spend most of his time working at Robertson Elementary, and his hard work would pay off and he would become a very well-respected teacher. And of course, his experience in the industry did help. His mother at first would choose not to work, but after a while she decided that it's probably time to get a job, and that's where she would get the job at the local newspapers. And quickly her fellow co-workers would describe her as a precise wordsmith with a very contagious laugh. The couple had been married for 34 years in total. Trey's school life was again pretty average, as well as he never had any problems with other school kids, so he never got into fights or made any enemies, and that was mainly due to the fact that he was a shy kid, and when he spoke words they were very limited. But of course again, that meant he would never get bullied, but also he would never make many friends. But even though from the outside he seemed like a normal kid, but it was on the inside where he became strange, and this strange version of himself would begin to leak out while he was in a conversation with his teacher. And after this conversation, his teacher would become more concerned about Trey and eventually would let his parents know. Now moving on to when Trey turned 13. It was a dark, gloomy evening, and well, Trey would get the devious plan to call 911 and complain of a suspicious shadow that he kept seeing outside of his parents' house. And of course this was not true. His real intentions were, when the officer came out to investigate, he would plant himself in the woods across the house with a small baseball bat, and when the officer wasn't looking, he would run and bash the officer in the head. Then he would want to steal the officer's firearm and then drive to his friend's house. Thankfully that would never happen. As Trey was running towards the officer would turn around and catch him. This action would land him in the psychiatric ward, where he would be evaluated by a psychiatrist. Nothing that would be any evident would come out from this incident, and so this was eventually dropped by both police and psychiatrist. Trey of course would begin to grow up into his teenage years, and nothing like that would ever happen, and it just seemed like Trey had returned to being his normal self. So the plan that he did a couple of years ago against the officer would become into a sheer coincidence and a mistake in his family's eyes. But during this growing up period, Trey would find himself falling in love with filmmaking, and so he would watch many movies as his source of inspiration. And with the fact that his family had bought him a new laptop, he would delve himself into the internet world. And so in September of 2006, he would discover a website that you're probably watching this video on today, called YouTube. Once he discovered that on YouTube you can create videos and share them to a lot of people, he wouldn't waste any time making his own channel and then his own video. His channel was called Lenscaps Productions. Once he made his channel, he would begin to sit behind his computer for many hours at a time, editing videos, and pretty quickly he began to upload many videos onto his channel. The videos that Trey first posted were short films, bloopers, and just generally videos for Trey. But as he created more and more videos, he would begin to incorporate his mother, father, and his brother. As Trey began to discover more of the world of film, he would also discover anime. And if you don't know what anime is, it's basically a Japanese style animation that quickly took rise all over the world. So in late 2006, almost a year when he first started his YouTube channel, Trey would decide to switch up his content style, and he would also change his name to Mr. Anime. This new part of Trey's YouTube life would focus on reviewing different movies and series of anime that he watched. From the get-go, viewers that watched Mr. Anime saw that he was a straightforward and honest guy. This style of content would definitely be opposite of many other YouTubers in this space, but this wouldn't be a bad thing. This would actually be a good thing, because this would give him his own uniqueness. Every review that he would do on anime, his viewers would know that there's no sugarcoating or any bias here at all. It's just straight facts. And well, for this reason, his channel would explode in 2011, and he would gain up to 1 million viewers. And of course, this is still in the early stages of YouTube, and this was massive. And by 2011, Trey would have uploaded up to 300 videos on YouTube. But weirdly, the more videos that Trey uploaded, the darker his content would become. It would be in between his former video reviews, where he would often do funny comedy stints to break away from his normal reviewing content, which his reviewing content was pretty repetitive. And eventually these break videos would become more disturbing than funny. Trey would find his third love besides anime and video making. And what was that third love? It was guns. And he would discover this passion while watching gun videos on YouTube. He would go on to buy dozens and also sell dozens of them over the next couple of years. And he would also incorporate firearms into his videos. He would start by making skits that would have him using firearms, and eventually turning those short videos into full demonstration videos at an unlawful range or a random building. Although as YouTube from 2010 to 2012 very openly endorsed firearms, there was no cause of concern found in his community. Everyone thought that what Trey was doing was okay. Trey would often condemn gun violence, many times as he was talking to the camera. Even though Trey was a strange character that would gain a lot of attention on the internet and would essentially become a mini celebrity on YouTube, his home life was unfortunately not the same at all. The things that Trey would fantasize as a child would never leave him as an adult, but instead of showing them like he did as a child, he would just learn to not share any of this and keep it to himself. For most of 2011, Trey was living by himself in his grandmother's home in Hempstead, because unfortunately she had recently passed away, and so he was safeguarding the house for the foreseeable future. And it was this isolation that would lead Trey to start plotting and scheming his plan to cause harm to others. And at first these things were small, but again, being alone meant that he could fully delve into these urges, and these urges would become bigger and bigger the longer he stayed by himself. And not only would these urges get bigger, they would become more sophisticated and of course more dangerous. And during this alone time, he would also be fascinated in historic school shooters and killers. And one of them was the notorious killer Ted Bundy. And this would lead him to formulate a plan on how he could do the most damage as he possibly could. It got to the point where he had downloaded satellite images of Waller High School, which was his former high school, and he would construct a path where he could ram his car through a gate and courtyard. And once he was in the school, he would get out of his car and claim as many victims as he could with a Zone 22 rifle. And also during this time, rumors began to circulate online about Trey apparently using live animals, including his own pet rabbit, as firing targets. And even though YouTube had no effect on Trey or his mental health, it did offer a window for others to see what was going on with Trey. And fans could notice that Mr. Anime was becoming more and more erratic, and where once videos were coherent and were well thought out, were now becoming more harder to follow and much more difficult to understand. Another thing that really didn't help Trey was his relationship with his father, because their relationship was becoming worse. Around Christmas time in 2011, he would share to his friends that he was planning to kill his father. And why was he planning to do this? Well, his father, who had become very upset with Trey for leaving college and giving up, this would give Trey a signal that his father had just written him off, as he was a crazy unstable son that was not going to do much with his own life. And of course this perception of Trey would be false to his father, but he wouldn't know that Trey had this feeling. And this would also be another reason why Trey would live at his grandmother's house. And of course, since Trey was alone, his father and brother would regularly and go check up on Trey. And unfortunately, every time he would go visit Trey, they would always find alcohol in his home. And this would start a big fight between the three. But unfortunately at the end, nothing would be resolved. And since after this fight, Trey's drinking habits would become more and more frequent and more heavy. And on March 19th, 2012, after a long session of just non-stop drinking, all the way through to the 20th, Trey would stay up all night thinking about his urges. And unfortunately, these urges would become to reality, mainly thanks to the amount of alcohol he had intaked. And in the early hours of March 20th, Trey would return to his family home, fully armed. and of course none of his family was expecting him. A couple of hours later, a call was made to the local police about the Sesler's home. The caller had said apparently they had heard unexpected noises coming from the property, so could you check it out? And of course pretty quickly officers were sent out to that property, and the officers knew that something was wrong as they got to the door. But either way, they would both begin to knock on the door, but they wouldn't get an answer, so they would knock again but still get no answer. But instead of leaving, they would begin to go around the perimeter of the property and would begin to look through the windows to see if anyone was inside. And it was at this point one of the officers would come rushing to the other officer, shouting that there's two deceased people. They were Rhoda, Lawton and Mark. All of them would be found with gunshot wounds. The home itself was a total mess from the top to the bottom, with rifle casings scattered all over the house. There were broken glass in every room, and carvings were found all over the walls, and one of them walls had a confession such as, "Why did I do this? I love my mum and dad and brother. God forgive me because I can't forgive myself." The police at this point had no idea that it was Trey that did this, but to their horror, Trey had packed over 100 ammunition rounds along with his rifle and would drive to Waller High School, which again was his old school. And at first he would sit in the car contemplating if he should go through this plan, and thankfully he would convince himself that this wasn't a good idea. And at this point the police were in a full force search for Trey, and thankfully they would find him at a local's friend's house in Magnolia, and they would know that he was the one that did this gruesome act because of the more confessions that he had wrote on his parents' wall. While interrogated, he would tell the officers that the reason that he had took his entire family's life was so that they wouldn't have to endure the pain and shame following his actions. The other details to the case I couldn't really find. All I read was many quotes from his friends and fans saying that we knew he was interested in gun violence when it came to video games, but we never knew he was capable of this. So that will be it for today's video. If true crime stories, intrigues or interests, then I highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as that's all I do. And if you do subscribe, you can expect a brand new video every week. But with all that being said, thank you for watching, and yeah, goodbye.